surrounding areas and the nation. Get ready. Black Focus starts right now. Phone lines open at 855-525-5683. So here's your host, David W. Coleman and Robert Webb.
Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Thursday edition of Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me if you want to join the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to talk to us. And more importantly, if you miss any part of the show, make sure you download the Join That Radio app. Well, download the app. That way you can carry me everywhere you go. But even if you can't catch the show then, you can certainly go out to our podcast and on any of your podcast platforms. I mean, Google, iPhone, it doesn't matter. We're on 8 different platforms. That ought to be plenty for you to go out and check us out, okay? So that's what we're doing today, and we want you to get involved. Also want to remind you that if you need to get some advertising out there, holler at the brother. We got some great rates for you, and I guarantee you'll be satisfied. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a story that's exploding that we'll talk about that's locally, and I did a little research, believe it or not, and I appreciate those people who sent me the information. But we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's jump out here and read the tease for today. How about that? So you'll get an idea of what we're going to discuss today. So should art educate you? I'll give you an example and you can be the judge. Okay? And how did our music drop the ball? So I'm going to play a song for you, and I'm telling you right now, Facebook, I don't own the rights to the music, but I think you need to hear this song because I think our artists have dropped the ball, particularly black artists. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Also, Georgia nips cheating cops in the bud. See ya. We'll talk about that. Also, Huff and Puff and Trump's wall falls down. Yeah, it was going to be built by the best material. Well, right now, the wind blew it over. We'll talk about that. And also, can a head football coach with a checkered past be a proper role model for impressionable young males? The locals are hot. Yeah. We're going to talk about all of that and a lot more today on Black Focus Radio. And I got some numbers that, when one particular subject that I'm going to talk about came up, I just thought about it. So I'll tell you about all of that here in just a moment. But let's do Black Facts.
Dynamic Black Facts. Our culture, our history, our people.
All right, so, I love doing Black Facts, and, I've been following the impeachment trial and been laughing and cussing at the TV and becoming even more disgusted by Republicans by the day. And if I can do that more, boy, they've really hit rock bottom. So, how much deeper or lower can they go as far as I'm concerned? So I keep hearing the Republicans scream about the Republican Party, this impeachment is trying to do away with what the people wanted and what the people voted for and this, that, and the other. No, it isn't. As a matter of fact, if you remember this election, Donald Trump lost by 3 million votes by the popular vote. So if it was really the people, then his ass wouldn't be in office in the first place. So that argument that you're hearing from the Republicans is a bunch of crap. Okay? It's a bunch of crap. And by the way, if it wasn't for the Electoral College, Trump wouldn't be in office. So, how is that a black fact? Well, let me educate you a little bit on our politics. All right? The Electoral College's racist origins. More than 2 centuries after it was designed to empower, listen, Southern white voters, the system continues to do just that. I need to read the title again because I don't think you all heard the title. Did y'all hear the title? I'm just wondering. Because, see, the title is significant. The Electoral College's racist origins. More than 2 centuries after it was designed, meaning made specifically to empower white voters, the system continues to do just that. Y'all didn't know that? Well, let me educate you, okay? Let me educate you. You mind? I like doing this. Is a colorblind political system possible under our Constitution? If it is, the Supreme Court's evisceration of the Voting Rights Act in 2013 did little to help matters. While black people in America today are experiencing 1950s level voter suppression, efforts to keep them and other citizens from participating in elections began within 24 hours of the Shelby County versus Holder ruling and have only increased since then. In Shelby County's oral argument, Justice Antonin Scalia cautioned, whenever a society adopts racial entitlements, it is very difficult to get them out through the normal political process. Ironically enough, there is some truth to an otherwise frighteningly numb claim. American elections have an acute history of racial entitlements. Only they don't privilege black people. For centuries, white votes have gotten undue weight as a result of innovations such as poll taxes, voter ID laws, and outright violence to discourage racial minorities from voting. The point was obvious to anyone paying attention, as William F. Buckley argued in his essay, Why the South Must Prevail. White Americans are entitled to take such measures as are necessary to prevail politically and culturally. Anywhere they are outnumbered because they are part of the advanced race. But American institutions boosted white political power in less obvious ways too, and the nation's oldest structural racial entitlement program is one of the most consequential. The Electoral College. I need to go back and read that William F. Buckley quote just for a minute. Y'all mind? Y'all mind if I read that again? Because see, what William F. Buckley said is what white males are experiencing right now as they see the browning of America. This is their fear. This is why you got to read, folks. Okay? The name of the essay, written by William F. Buckley, Why the South Must Prevail. White Americans are entitled to take such measures, I'm quoting now, as are necessary to prevail politically and culturally. So what does he mean by such measures? That's something for you all to think about. Because the worst of what you can think about is potentially the worst that white people, at least some, are willing to do to you. But America's institution boosted political power in less obvious ways. It was the Electoral College. Commentators today tend to downplay the extent to which race and slavery contributed to the framers' creation of the Electoral College, in effect whitewashing history. Of the considerations that favored into the framers' calculus, race and slavery were perhaps foremost. Y'all know that? This is the Electoral College. This is why white people don't want to get rid of the Electoral College. Of course, the framers had a number of other reasons to engineer the Electoral College. Fearful that the president might fall victim to a host of civic vices, that he could become susceptible to corruption and cronyism, sow disunity, and exercise overreach, the men sought to constrain executive power consistent with constitutional principles such as federalism and checks and balances. That ain't working today. The delegates to the Philadelphia Convention had scant conception of the American presidency, the duties, powers, and limits of the office, but they did have a handful of ideas about the method for selecting the chief executive. When the idea of a popular vote was raised, they griped openly that it could result in too much democracy. With few objections, they quickly dispensed with the notion that the people might choose their leader. But delegates from the slave-holding South had another rationale for opposing the direct election method. They had no qualms about articulating it. Doing so would be to their disadvantage. Even James Madison, who professed a theoretical commitment to popular democracy, succumbed to the realities of the situation. The future president acknowledged that the people at large was, in his opinion, the fittest to select the chief executive. And yet, in the same breath, he captured the sentiment of the South in some most diplomatic terms. There was only difficulty, however, of a serious nature attending an immediate choice by people. The right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the northern than the southern states, and the latter could have no influence in election on the scores of Negroes. The substitution of electors obviated this difficulty and seemed, on the whole, to be liable to fewest objections. Behind Madison's statement were stark facts. The population in the North and the South were approximately equal, but roughly 1/3 of those living in the South were held in bondage. Because of its considerable non-voting slave population, that region would have less clout under the popular system. The ultimate solution was an indirect method of choosing the president, one that could leverage the 3/5 compromise, the Faustian bargain they'd already made to determine how congressional seats were apportioned. With about 93% of the country's slave toiling in just 5 southern states, that region was the undoubted beneficiary of the compromise, increasing the size of the South congressional delegation by 42%. When the time came to agree on the system of choosing the president, it was all too easy for the delegates to resort to the 3/5 compromise as the foundation. The peculiar system that emerged was the Electoral College. Right from the get-go, the Electoral College has produced no shortage of lessons about the impact of racial entitlement in selecting the president. History buffs and Hamilton fans were aware that in the first major failure, the Electoral College produced a tie between Thomas Jefferson and his putative running mate, Aaron Burr. What's less known about the election of 1800 is the way the Electoral College succeeded, which is to say that it operated as one might have expected, based on its embrace of the 3/5 compromise. The South's baked-in advantage, the bonus electoral votes it received for maintaining slaves, all while not allowing those slaves to vote, made the difference in the election outcome. It gave the slaveholder Jefferson an edge over his opponent, the incumbent president and abolitionist John Adams. To quote Yale's law Akil Reed Amar, the third president metaphorically rode into the executive mansion on the backs of slaves. That third president, by the way, was Thomas Jefferson. The election continued an almost uninterrupted trend of Southern slave owners and their dough-faced sympathizers winning the White House that lasted until Abraham Lincoln's victory in 1860. In 1803, the 12th Amendment modified the Electoral College to prevent another Jefferson-Burr-type debacle. 6 decades later, the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, thus ridding the South of its windfall electors. Nonetheless, the shoddy system continued to cleave to the American democratic ideal along racial lines. Let me stop there for a moment because I think that part is interesting. Is the fact that the South, they basically argued that slaves, although counted as 3/5 of a people, should be counted so that they could get extra votes in the Electoral College. Now, why is that important? Because that's exactly what they're doing today. They're rigging the process. That's what gerrymandering is. They've rigged the process so that they can stay in power. Now, I know some say, well, Democrats do it too, but not to the extent of what the Republicans have done. That's interesting. Man, that's wild. Okay. In 1803, the 12th Amendment, let's see, we did that. Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah. Nevertheless, the shoddy system continued to cleave the American democratic ideas along racial lines. In 1876 presidential election, the Democrat Samuel Tilden won the popular vote, but some electoral votes were in dispute, including those in, wait for it, Florida. Even back in 1876, Florida was always having problems with their votes. An ad hoc commission of lawmakers and Supreme Court justices was impaneled to resolve the matter. Ultimately, they awarded the contested electoral votes to Republican Rutherford B. Hayes, who had lost the popular vote. As a part of the agreement known as the Compromise of 1877, the federal government removed the troops that were stationed in the South after the Civil War to maintain order and protect black voters. The deal at once marked the end of the brief Reconstruction era. Note why we deserve reparations. There was no Reconstruction era. The redemption of this old South and the birth of the Jim Crow regime. The decision to remove soldiers from the South led to the restoration of white supremacy and voting through the systematic disenfranchisement of black people, virtually accomplishing over the next 8 decades what slavery had accomplished in the country's first 8 decades. And so the Electoral College's misfire in 1876 helped ensure that Reconstruction would not remove the original stain of slavery so much as smear it onto the other parts of the Constitution fabric, and countenance and racialized patchwork democracy that endured until the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What's clear is that more than 2 centuries after it was designed to empower Southern whites, the Electoral College continues to do just that. The current system has a distinct adverse impact on black voters, diluting their political power. Because the concentration of black people is highest in the South, their preferred presidential candidate is virtually assured to lose their home state's electoral votes. Despite black voting patterns to the contrary, 5 of the 6 states whose populations are 25% or more blacks have been reliably red in recent presidential elections. 3 of those states have not voted for a Democrat in more than 4 decades. Under the Electoral College, black votes are submerged. It's the precise reason for the success of the Southern strategy. It's precisely how, as Buckley might say, the South has prevailed. Among the Electoral College's supporters, the favorite rationalizations is that without the advantage, politicians might disregard a large swath of the country's voters, particularly in small and geographically inconvenient states. Even if the claim was true, it's hardly conceivable that switching to a popular vote system would lead candidates to ignore more voters than they do under the current one. 3/4 of Americans live in states where most of the major party candidates do not campaign. More important, this voters will be ignored rationale is morally indefensible. Awarding a numerical few voting enhancements to decide for the many amounts to the tyranny of the minority. Under any other circumstances, we would call an electoral system that weighs some votes more than others a farce, which the Supreme Court more or less did in the series of landmark cases. Can you imagine in a world which the votes of black people are weighed more heavily because presidential candidates would otherwise ignore them, or, for that matter, any other reason? No. That would be a racial entitlement. What's easier to imagine is the racial burdens the Electoral College continues to wreak on black people. Critics of the Electoral College are right to denounce it for handing victory to the loser of the popular vote twice in the past 2 decades. They are also correct to point out that it distorts our politics, including by encouraging presidential candidates to concentrate their efforts in a few states that are not representative of the country at large. See Iowa, by the way. But the disempowerment of black voters need to be added to the list of concerns because it is core to what the Electoral College is and what it has always been: racist. Race consciousness, establishment, and retention of the Electoral College has supported an entitlement program that our 21st century democracy cannot justify. If people truly want ours to be a race-blind politics, they can start with plucking the strange, low-hanging fruit from the Constitution. That is the Electoral College. Damn. I hope y'all got that. I hope y'all understand what's going on here, right? See, many of y'all say, well, my vote don't count. They've set it up so it won't count. And the more you sit around and scream about your vote not counting, they can continue this farce. Because that's exactly what's going on with this Electoral College. I don't know how many of you all knew that the Electoral College was based on race. The Southerners were slick. They said, hey, if you didn't understand what I just read, here it is in bold-faced type. White slave owners said, hey, now remember, North and South, as generated as by the Mason-Dixon line, what they called North and South, they had the exact same populations. But when you add the slaves, and during that time they were only considered 3/5 of a man, that created more numbers for southern states. And because of those numbers, the southern states were awarded more representatives. And it continues today. The argument that they've been making is, oh, well, we can't get rid of the Electoral College because that means that presidential candidates, they'll only campaign with, in a few states. Well, that's what they do now. See Iowa. See New Hampshire. That's why so many states over the last few years have been moving their primaries up to March 3rd so they can feel like they're relevant. See, the media doesn't tell you this. And the fact that you don't study history, because your history classes are not going to tell you this. And if it wasn't for the Electoral College handing the election to Rutherford B. Hayes in 1877, maybe we would have gotten that 40 acres and a mule. But because of the Southern strategy that continues today, that was re-implemented by Lee Atwater in the late 60s for Nixon and carried forward in the Republican Party through the Fords, the Bushes. Isn't this ugly? But you don't read history. And that's our Black Fact for today.
For more dynamic Black facts, our culture, our history, our people, on JoyNetRadio.com.
If you want to read that piece that I just read about the Electoral College, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to repost it at the top of my wall. I'm doing it right now because it is so profound. And it just goes to show you that even our black politicians and our black leaders have no clue of what the Electoral College was designed to do. Even those who have good intentions, the white people, they have no clue, or do they know what the Electoral College was designed to do. More and more every day, I say, the Electoral College has got to go. One man, one vote. A state should not be weighed higher than another state. One man, one vote. And who wins the majority should be the winner. Period. 855-525. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. 5683. One other programming note. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Phyllis Webb. Miss Webb passed away last week. Phyllis Webb is the aunt of Robert Webb. So Robert is not going to be here today, and he probably won't be here tomorrow as they have her homegoing services. But Miss Webb was a loyal listener to the show. She listened every day and would quite often send comments to her nephew. So I just want to take a little time out to acknowledge the passing of one of our listeners and the aunt of Robert Webb. Also, some programming notes. On tomorrow, we will have, I almost got my guests mixed up. Tomorrow, we've been talking a lot about the Liddell Lee debacle. And I call it a debacle until there is some clearance, some clarification on what's going on. If you don't know, Liddell Lee was one of the men who was put to death back in 2017 when the governor, Asa Hutchinson, and the attorney general decided that, Leslie Rutledge, let me give her name, decided that they wanted to kill people because the drug that they were using to put people to death was about to expire, and the manufacturer had sued states. I don't know if y'all remember this. The manufacturer of that drug initially said that they did not make that drug to be used to kill people. But somehow or another, the states over the years developed a combination of a drug cocktail that included that main drug that they were using to kill people. The company said, no, you cannot. They sued the state and they won. They could not get a refill. So states started trying to put people to death because once they were out, they were out. And I've forgotten what state that was that put someone to death was it North Carolina, I want to say, that put someone to death on a different drug, and it was horrific. So Liddell Lee was one of those 4 men. Remember, Arkansas wanted to put to death 8. Liddell Lee was one of those men, but now we understand that he was put to death under murky circumstances. And there is potentially evidence to prove that Liddell Lee was innocent. But it seems that Liddell Lee's attorneys, the Innocence Project, all of those people who are fighting for Liddell Lee, for Rhonda Brasfield is another one, seems to be running into roadblocks from the Jacksonville Police Department, along with the Attorney General and the Governor. And the reason I say the Attorney General and the Governor is because if they really wanted to solve this problem, they would. All they've got to say is call. They don't even have to wait for a judge. The governor is the ultimate voice in saying someone can be put to death. After all the things have been exercised in the courts, the final person who can say yay or nay is the governor. This is why the governor is so important in this case. Because the governor can simply call Jacksonville today and say, hey, look, this looks bad on me. This looks bad on Leslie Rutledge, and it looks bad on our state. We need to fix this problem. Let's find out the truth and let the chips fall where they may. You know, if you did that, I'd have much more respect for you. I already don't have, I'm going to be honest, I don't have any respect for this governor because of his underhandedness. But if you simply did this, Governor Asa Hutchinson, I would have much more respect for you. But you're not going to do that. You're going to hope and pray that it goes away. It's not. It's already trended nationally. So tomorrow on the show, we're going to have Rhonda Brasfield. Rhonda Brasfield is a young lady who apparently has been working with the Innocence Project, who has been working tirelessly to abolish the death penalty. She's from right here, well, she's originally from Stuttgart, but she's an attorney that practices law here in Little Rock. We're going to talk to her about this case. Where is it? She'll be on tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Where is it? How can we move forward? How can we put pressure as a community on this governor, on the Attorney General, on the Jacksonville Police Department to release any evidence that can be tested? Because state law requires that in capital cases, all the evidence must be maintained. So they should have any evidence that they found that identified or suggested that Liddell Lee was the perpetrator of this crime. I don't know if he is or isn't. But shouldn't we know, if you're taking somebody's life, shouldn't you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person that you're killing is the person that committed the crime? And based on the information that has been released, there are questions. There are questions. So we're going to talk to Rhonda Brasfield tomorrow about this very, very interesting case that has once again placed Little Rock and Arkansas proper in the sights of the nation and casted a negative shadow on this state. Our authorities, our officials just can't get out of its own way. And part of that is because of the people. Also on Monday, we're going to have a candidate for judge, Peggy Egan, who will be in studio to talk about her campaign and where she wants to go. And next Friday, we'll be talking to, yesterday we talked about hiring a diversity officer and how it won't fix racist company cultures. And I was actually going back and forth with Dr. Brewer yesterday about this very thing, not knowing that Dr. Brewer is a chief diversity officer at Arkansas Tech. And I had an interesting conversation with her while on the air and yesterday evening off the air. And it seems to me that we're going to get an eye-opening interview with Dr. Brewer next week. I'm just going to say it like that. So that'll be next Friday as well. And of course, on Fridays, we're expecting Keisha Cobb as well. And we'll talk to her a little bit about her business and what she's trying to do as far as empowering people to get houses. Look, you don't need to miss tomorrow's show. It's going to be very, very interesting. Okay? So I wanted to give you an update on those things that are happening coming up. Now, I will tell you next hour, we're going to talk about a football coach that was recently hired here in Little Rock. And I've got some other details that might surprise you. Okay? That might surprise you. So we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. I do want to talk about, before we get to the next segment, I want to talk about, I tell you what, let's do this. Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I want to quickly talk about the 30 police officers that were caught cheating in Georgia and how none of them will be on the street. And we'll also talk a little bit about PLOTUS. You know, if you don't know who PLOTUS is, that's the pathological liar of the United States. We'll talk about They All Fall Down. Back in a moment. You're listening to Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices on JoyNetRadio.com.
Of James F. Swindoll provides our clients the personal care and attention that larger law firms cannot offer. Our experienced attorneys have brought hundreds of cases to verdict in state and federal court and recovered millions for our clients. If you or a loved one have been injured or have property wrongfully damaged, we may be able to help. Do not hesitate to contact our firm anytime for a free attorney consultation. Call 1-800-848-1290. That's 1-800-848-1290. Or email inquiries at arkansas-personal-injury.com. Our law offices are centrally located at 212 Center Street in Little Rock. That's the law offices of James F. Swindoll, personal injury and products liability attorney serving Arkansas since 1977.
Mitchell Funeral Home welcomes all of Arkadelphia and Arkansas to connect with a family-owned and operated service provider in Clark County since 1966. At Mitchell Funeral Home, they understand that the funeral is a celebration of a life and legacy, so the entire staff takes great pride in the caring, personal, and professional services they provide. Cremations, funeral planning, burial policy, life insurance, notary, and monument sales are just a few of the services they offer. Flexible packages are available as well. Mitchell Funeral Home appreciates the trust and confidence placed in them and will continue to enhance their services so as to serve you better. Call now. Get connected. 870-246-2611. That's 870-246-2611. Call, click, or come by. MitchellFuneralServices.com. Don't wait till we're needed. Call us now. Let's walk through this together. 870-246-2611. It's quality you can appreciate and service you can depend on at Mitchell Funeral Home.
Hi, this is Alvin from Habibi's 4317 East Broadway in North Little Rock. We still have the green top at your very next stop. The same great quick service for the Morongo. Give us a call, 501-663-1553 or 664-2992, or call our toll-free number, 1-877-HABIBI-1. Diapers, pull-ups, hospital beds, wheelchairs, Simply Fit, diabetic supplies, underpads, and more. Your durable medical supply center.
LeBron James is the greatest player we've seen this generation. You have to be careful when you start saying, and so, well, he wasn't as good as Mike, or he wasn't as good as Magic. Every generation you get that. You begin to sound like that old man that lives down the street, and every time you walk on his yard, and you even walk by his yard, he's on the porch, and he's got that little crooked finger, he's like, get off my lawn! Get off my lawn! Join the weekly sports magazine every Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. on JoyNetRadio.com. Get off my lawn!
All right, welcome back to the show, Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices. I was just reading in the break a Vanity Fair article, Jared Kushner. Palestinians have never done anything right in their sad, pathetic lives. That's Jared Kushner. That's the boy wonder that PLOTUS employed to solve the Middle East peace problem. Man, if y'all don't vote this fool out, man, this is just crazy. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Lord, Lord, Lord. By the way, did y'all hear about the guy who in Tennessee, Wilson County, decided that he would smoke a joint, light up a joint in front of the judge? Apparently he did it on purpose. Wilson County is in the Nashville area in Tennessee. Also, evangelical pastor said Jesus would beat the crap out of John Bolton. Where my black preachers at? This evangelical pastor said Jesus would beat the crap out of John Bolton.
Wait. What did you just say?
Evangelical pastor Rodney Howard Brown lashed out at former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton this week in a series of tweets after reports emerged that former Trump administration officials' upcoming book contains details about the president's relationship with Ukraine.
Okay.
You are a slime ball of the highest order. I should have knocked your sorry butt through the door of the Oval Office into the Rose Garden when I saw you.
Wow.
I would have gladly been arrested. What a Benedict Arnold.
Wow.
I'm glad you're fired. That's what Brown said. Hang on, there's more.
There's more.
I have no respect for someone who is disloyal to the president and loyal to the deep state. No respect at all. What a globalist sellout.
These are the people that's surrounding our president.
Yeah.
That's talking
The
like-
spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
The spiritual
I was
leaders.
going to go there.
The ones that laying their hands on it.
Just anybody that's surrounding the president talking like this, I should have knocked you down when I saw you in the White House, in the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it sound like the mob.
It really does, doesn't it?
And Bolton is what do they call him? A rat.
He's a rat
He's
fink.
a rat fiend.
You know, I was watching The Irishman the other day.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to watch it yet.
Oh man, it took me like 5 weeks. It's so long, man. I'm like, man, it's still going
Yeah,
on.
it's 3 hours. I hadn't watched it yet.
I watch it like in 45-minute increments. I watch a little bit, then watch something else, and then the next day I come back and watch it again.
So
But,
it's surrounded by, or he's surrounded by gangsters, or he's the what do you call it, the boss?
Yeah,
And what do you call it, the boss?
he John
The
Gotti.
Don.
Yeah, the Don.
He's
Yeah,
the Don, and then all the bosses around him, and they saying, you know, people like, you know, they talk like that in gang. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
And then he's the spiritual leader.
well, you heard what Paula White said last week, didn't you?
Oh God.
She said that anyone who doesn't support Trump and they have babies, the babies are of Satan. If y'all don't vote these fools out of office,
it's crazy, man.
I'm telling you.
This is crazy.
But what you see is that, particularly from that evangelical wing, is that they are not Christian people.
Right.
Number
Right.
one,
Right.
and this is how slavery existed in this country for so
Well,
long.
if you read, I can see his face. The writer, the '60s. His name slips me, but he talks about in the book Fire Next Time. I mean Fire, not Fire Next Time. In his book, he talks about whiteness and how whiteness. I want to say it's not because I just did a study on Adam Clayton Pye. It ain't Adam Clayton Pye, and that's the name that keeps bouncing in my head. But anyway, he talks about whiteness, and he talks about how in America the whiteness trumps everything, and so in their religion it becomes whiteness, and so it's like everything is based on what makes us comfortable as white people, and that means you have to be, you have to if I'm made uncomfortable, you violated my whiteness. You know
what that's called, right?
It was called whiteness.
It's called white supremacy.
Yeah, well, I was just,
That's what that
He
is.
refers to it as whiteness.
I know, but that's what it is. It's
And
white supremacy.
How it overshadowed. What is his name? What is got the eyes? What's his name? I'm reading this book right now.
Well, did you hear the piece I read about the Electoral College? And this is going to by William F. Buckley. Let me find it. Is going to support what you're saying, because let's see here. I'll find it here in just a moment. But in order to maintain the slavery that they did, they had to have some type of justification, and they couldn't justify it by just what am I doing here? Okay, by what they had been doing. Oh, James Baldwin, yeah, the Fire Next Time, yeah.
I don't know why I couldn't think of James Baldwin, man.
All right, so
William
F. Buckley.
Yeah.
Is that what he's quoting?
No.
All right, so let me find this quote by William Buckley. Okay, so here's what William Buckley says. All right, in an essay he wrote called "Why the South Must Prevail." White Americans.
Whoa. When did William Buckley write that?
Let's see. I can tell you the day here. Yeah, it was years ago because he's dead now.
Yeah, okay.
He wrote it in an essay years ago. It was actually in a paper. But here's what he wrote. He said, "White Americans are entitled to take such measures as are necessary to prevail politically and culturally." That's white supremacy.
Yeah, that's what James Baldwin talks about.
Right. And it doesn't matter. It says such measures. Do you understand what it means by such measures? That means anything that they can do,
Anything deemed necessary.
right, to prevail politically and culturally. That's why I'm trying to tell people this was part of the Southern strategy that many people became aware of with Lee Atwater. But JC, this article that I'm reading is from how the electoral colleges were created. So this has been baked into the American society for decades.
Wow.
For decades. So what Baldwin is talking about, he's calling it whiteness,
Yeah.
but what it really is white supremacy.
Right.
That's what it is.
And he talks about how it is so deeply embedded until they can understand that if you don't. Here's the phrase. Because they were doing this at the beginning of the 90s. Why we have to be / African American, Chinese American, Korean American.
Right.
why can't we all just be American?
Mm-hmm.
And my response is, because when you say, why can't we all be an American, it doesn't require any adjustment on you.
There you go.
It requires a much adjustment on the rest of us.
Exactly.
In other words, when you say, why can't we all be American, you mean hot dogs, apple pie, and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like none of them except
Right.
apple pie. I like
Right.
apple pie.
Mm-hmm.
But my point I'm making is, I have to adjust.
Right.
And so your whiteness says, you know, this is just normal. Well,
Right.
it's not normal for me. It's just
Exactly.
different for
Exactly.
me. You know,
Exactly.
and so when you have your family outings don't look like my family outings.
Exactly.
Your speech, it doesn't always look like my speech.
Mm-hmm.
And so that prevails in all aspects, in business, in church,
Right.
in politics, and to hear William F. Buckley say something like, or write something like that, he was because you know he's an intellectual.
He claimed to be.
Well, he was an intellectual, and so he was.
He was
able,
you
he
can't
was
see
able
to me. You can't be racist and an intellectual.
Well, yeah, well,
You know.
but he's able to take that narrative, that racist narrative, and put it in some highfalutin language.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he says things like such means,
Mm-hmm.
you know, somebody from South Georgia would say, you know, whatever we do,
Exactly.
you know, we got to do it, you know, to the glory of our whiteness.
Exactly.
But William F. Buckley ain't gonna say it like that.
Exactly.
You know, so wow. Okay, one last thing. Did you hear about Raphael? Oh, he pastors. Oh, have mercy, all these names running through my head. I just got to be doing a study on him too.
Old age disease.
Yeah, well, yeah. He pastors Ebenezer in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, yeah.
What's his name?
I just watched his campaign video
Yeah, that's
this
what I'm talking
morning.
about. He's running for Congress now,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome.
I don't know much about him.
That brother is some kind of something. He's a millennial king. Is who he is.
Okay.
He's
Okay.
a millennial Martin Luther King,
Okay.
and he's something.
Well, I'm gonna do. I saw his. I don't know how I ended up watching his political campaign thing
He
this
spoke
morning.
at Central's for the 50th.
I wasn't here.
Okay.
I wasn't.
You weren't here?
No, I didn't come
you
back.
Were. You were.
Not for the 50th.
For the 55th.
Uh-uh.
I was the MC for the at the.
I wasn't
at the
there.
Robinson. You weren't there.
Uh-uh.
But you were in the city. You were in the city.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
I remember making a reference about how all you doggone
What you mean?
tigers everywhere.
Exactly.
I said so.
Exactly.
It's just ridiculous. It's,
Yeah.
You know, it's ridiculous. They
They
got
are.
three representatives right now in our legislature, and they all came up together, and all of them graduated from Central.
Yeah.
And I said, y'all get on my nerves.
Yeah.
I said, I work
Don't
with
hate.
you that I got to hear this every day.
Don't hate.
About,
Don't hate.
about-
Hate doesn't look good on you, JC.
anyway,
You know.
but he was the speaker for that event.
Okay.
And I heard him speak, and the things he was saying, I said, this brother is.
Well, I'm gonna look
is
into it.
woke. He woke. Trust me.
I'm gonna look into it because I don't know how his campaign video came across my wall this morning, but I was actually watching it to see it. And I said I'm gonna look into him.
I'm shocked to see because here's the problem we have as preachers. Somebody has to cry out to Pharaoh. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
that's how we classify it.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, it's hard to run for office. It's hard to be in office
Mm-hmm.
and talk crap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're in a position where you can't. There's certain conduct and certain
Decorum.
decorum.
Yeah.
And positions you just have to be careful of.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a preacher, and your salary comes from the church and not from, you know,
The Southern Baptist Convention.
yeah. So you can tell the governor what you need to tell the governor.
Exactly.
You can tell the president what you need to tell the president.
Yeah.
You can cry out.
Mhm.
So that's always difficult. But
Mhm.
then that we do need voices like him.
Oh, yeah.
In
Oh, yeah.
Congress, in Congress. So there you go. There you go.
Well, I'm going to look into him this
Yeah.
evening
No, he's
and
a
get
great
more
brother.
information on him because, when I heard he was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church,
Oh yeah.
I said, well, wait a minute now. I'm about to look into him, so I'll definitely look into that.
He's a millennial
there's-
king.
So no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Hey, but thanks for stopping by and, dropping a little knowledge on the
You
folks.
said this preacher was talking about cold cocking somebody in the White House in the Oval Office. I said, what is he talking about?
Man, these preachers, man, these and you know your boy Scott, Daryl Scott, he traveling around giving away money to black folks.
I read that story. I said, what is this dude,
Man, somebody need the blanket party here, man.
He need a drop. What
He need to be drop squad.
Drop squad.
He needed a drop squad, man.
That brother. Well, you know when he started supporting Trump, they said his membership dropped considerably. So a part of the offering that they were getting at the church, part of that was being taken up. $5 or $6 from the offering each person giving was automatically put into a fund that was going for his housing.
Really?
So as a result, with the membership dropping, that money cut low.
Yeah.
And his house came up, and now he's having to lose his house.
So he's selling his soul regardless, right?
And all he got to do is call Trump billionaire, ain't he?
Hey, well,
He claimed to be.
yeah. We still haven't seen his tax
Yeah,
return.
that's what I'm saying. That dude is not a billionaire.
No, he ain't.
He's not a billionaire.
Well, I know what he is. He's a nut.
I don't want to hear it. Goodbye.
All right, man. You have a good day.
Okay.
That's our illustrious leader, JC Love, of course, dropping in on Black Focus Radio. Coming up here in just a moment, we are going to talk about this head football coach. I'm laughing because I'm tripping. I mean, what the hell is going on in Little Rock? And I promise you a song that I was going to play for you. I'm going to play that out of the top of the hour. You got to hear this song by this rapper. And what happened to our music educating us. We'll get to that and a lot more. Hey, Dr. Quinn. By the way, I called Dr. Quinn Dr. Brewer. Dr. Quinn will be on the show next Friday evening at 1 p.m. Looking forward to meeting her. Had a delightful conversation with her yesterday. And we'll dive into these diversity officers. Is it just a panacea? We'll get into all of that. It's Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices on joynetradio.com.
Business owner. Can I talk to you for a moment? How many people have come up to you and said, hey, I didn't know you had a business? Yeah, that can happen when you don't advertise. I have a solution for you. Advertise on joynetradio.com and let the world know that you're in business. I know what you're thinking. Advertising is so expensive. I've got a great package for you that will cut your expense and increase your bottom line. It's only $125 for startup and new businesses. Call me, David W. Coleman, at 615-554-0568, and I'll put together a package specifically for your business. Now is the time to tell the world, hey, I'm in business. Come spend your money on quality goods in my store. Let us help you at joynetradio.com. Here's the number. Call me, 615-554-0568. We are here to assist you in building your brand.
Hi, I'm attorney Theodore Thompson from Thompson Law Firm, and I want to help with your legal matters. Whether it's criminal defense, bankruptcy, personal injury, or family law, I want to help you. I can be reached at 501-503-5095. Don't face your legal issues alone. You need an attorney whose primary objective is to provide you with the best legal representation. Our office address is 415 North McKinley, Suite 710 in Little Rock. I'm attorney Theodore Thompson, and I want to provide you.
You got it. It's Little Rock's answer to your aggravation. Joy Network.
The views and opinions expressed today on Black Focus Radio are not the views and opinions of the station, its management, or its advertisers. Now, let's get ready to focus on our issues, our solutions, using our voices on Black Focus Radio.
Welcome to Black Focus, the show designed with our community in mind, where we focus on our issues, developing our solutions, using our voices. Central Arkansas, surrounding areas, and the nation. Get ready. Black Focus starts right now. Phone lines open at 855-525-5683. So here's your host, David W. Coleman and Robert Webb.
All right, welcome back to the show, Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683. Be sure to download the Joynet Radio app at your respective app store. Get that done. And, of course, catch the rest of the show this afternoon once I upload it. If you miss any part, just go out to your favorite, go to anchor.fm and do Black Focus Radio, or go to, Google Podcast or Apple Podcast, and just enter Black Focus Radio and we'll pop up and you'll be able to catch the entire show, and you could fast forward, back, reverse it, whatever you need to do, rewind to get whatever you need to get out of the show, and spread the word about Black Focus as well. We'd really appreciate it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Really appreciate JC Love sitting in with me today earlier. So, but I just thought that was some interesting information. So this hour, okay, so the first thing we're going to do here in just a moment, I'm going to play this song for you, all right? And I'll talk about that here in a moment. But also, I want to make sure that I talk about the new head football coach that was hired at Southwest High School here in Little Rock. And I got some interesting numbers, and I went to a source that was very reliable about how many black head coaches are there actually in the state of Arkansas, because I think that's important to understand as well. I mentioned the border wall. There are a couple of things I want to make sure I cover. There's a border wall that was built in Mexico, one of Trump's walls. It has already fallen down. They're using the excuse that the concrete hadn't cured, so the wind blew it down. What a joke. They diverted $7.2 million to build this wall, and it's already fallen down. Also, in the state of Georgia, 30 state troopers were fired, including 3 from Grovetown. I guess that's Grovetown, Georgia. Come to find out that all 30 of them cheated on their exams. Okay? The majority of them are white, but there are some black ones in there as well. There are a couple of, there's one. Trying to see if there are any women in there. That looks like 2, 3, it looks 4 women in there as well. So 3 white women, 1 black woman. So all of them have been fired. Makes you wonder how many of them, for it to be that many to be cheating, it just seems like a conspiracy to me. And how many cheated prior to that? I'm just asking for a friend. That's what I do, is ask for friends. So we covered the wall. By the way, talked about Jared Kushner. I did repost the article about the Electoral College. So go and check that out as well. You might want to read that article about Jared Kushner. I mean, man, I'm just dumbfounded by some of the things that these people say that's out of this White House. I would just shake my head, but if I keep shaking my head, then I'd probably get a crook in my neck of all the dumb stuff that these people say. I just really would. Okay. Let's see. Also, let's go ahead, and I want to play this song. And this song, let me look. It's not by, I thought maybe it was by the person who posted it. It doesn't tell me the name of the artist. It looks like Barz, B-A-R-Z is the name. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because I've been tough on rappers. And I'm going to continue to be tough on rappers. And the reason I've been tough on rappers, and I don't care if you're now reformed, is because rap artists are responsible in some part, not all, but in some part of the debasement of our young people. Now, let me be clear. I don't want to sound like I'm some old fuddy-duddy. That music go rot your brain. No, that's not what I'm saying. I respect all genres of music. But I am a firm believer that garbage in is garbage out. That's just me. If you put too much fast food and sugar in your body's going to have some problems. You put too much irrelevant information in your brain's going to have some problems, and it's going to reflect on how you live every day. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because, see, when I grew up, music was the saving soul for a lot of us. And what I mean by that is that people like Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, I mean, the list goes on and on. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the Stylistics, all of them sang songs about liberation. Sly and the Family Stone, Larry Graham. They sang songs about improving yourself. Okay? They sang songs about avoiding, even Curtis Mayfield, who many would argue is one of the most genius people that has come along in the music industry and who suffered from drug abuse. Even he tried to make music that empowered you, that made you feel like somebody. And then around the late 80s, that changed. And we saw what the evolution of what many people call gangster rap. How many times can I call you a B or an H? How many times can I, talk about screwing you? And how many ways? Graphically. And we accepted it. We accepted it in our community, not understanding that if our children grow up listening to this music, many of those children are going to try to take on the ways of what they hear on the radio. Part of the reason we got so many kids walking around now with their butts showing is because of what they saw rappers do. Even though it was a fashion statement about prison, and it wasn't a good one. So, at what point do we start demanding from our artists that you put out music that's going to empower our people? What our artists, people like Jay-Z, all of these guys who made millions of dollars off of devaluing black life, highlighting drugs, gangs, and violence, to the edification that many young people, and then the irony is that some of these guys who were singing about it never ever participated in that lifestyle. But they exploited. Look, they were worse. We grew up with blaxploitation movies. This is what I call blaxploitation music. And even today, many of these rappers, our young people will listen to them before they listen to logical reason. I say all the time on this show, if you're taking your advice from a rapper, then you might want to check that advice. Sorry, I'm just being real with you. There's rap you can do that is hardcore, that will empower our people. But instead, y'all go to the debasement of our people. Y'all go to the lowest rung, some of these rappers. So, yesterday, someone sent me a very, very powerful rap song. And it says, see, in the 80s, hip hop, this is the music they won't play today. And what this song is about, well, just listen. I think you'll like it.
Down, cause if I don't, you would probably never know. First thing first, you know back in middle school when they taught us it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws, they just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislative branch, yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost them. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't ever even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in '08, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't wanna tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the 3rd branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon, they had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in. Cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
Boom. I'm going to repost that on my wall as well. And I hope that you all will go out and make sure that you spread that. Because did you get that? Did you hear? That was a cold-blooded rap right there. But you know what he was talking about? He was talking about voting. He was talking about the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. He was telling you how it affects your life. Who wouldn't listen to that beat? The point I'm trying to make is that we need more conscious artists. Artists can change the world. We just need more conscious artists. So I reposted that on my wall. I hope you all will make that go viral, because if nothing else, and this is what I talk about all the time on this show, is that part of the reason that you're in the predicament that you're in is because you don't vote. And he's exactly right. When you voted Obama in, you didn't give him any backup. So in 2010, more Republicans got voted in because white people said, oh, we got a black president. We gotta do something. I've said over and over again on this show that let's use this next election. Let's use this next election to prove a point. If you have not voted, ever, or if you have not voted in years, and you can vote and you are a minority, let's go to the polls. Let's vote en masse. Let's vote in a block and show Republicans and Democrats alike that we are not going to sit down and take this anymore. We demand action from each and every one of you. I don't give a damn if you're Republican or Democrat. At the end of the day, when you go to Washington, D.C., you ought to be passing policies that help every American, not just your constituents. So I reposted that on my wall. You're exactly right, Dr. Quinn. That's what you call conscious rap. That's what we need more of. We need conscious rap. We need rap that's going to fill our young people's heads with knowledge that will make them ask questions, that will not dumb them down and make them feel like the only thing that makes them somebody is the number of hoes they got, the number of mollies that they can pop, the number of 40s that they can down in one sitting. Hello, don't get mad at me. Get mad at yourself. Let's get to the polls. 855-525-5683 is the number. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here in Little Rock. Because, as you know, the school system has been taken over. They just celebrated the 5th year. And there is no return in sight. Now, what no one wants to admit, and if we had real legitimate black leaders here, they would admit that the school system was taken over simply because, for the first time in its history, the school board was predominantly black and had majority black votes. So they sought to take over that school system. They don't give a damn about this whole thing about black kids failing. They don't give a damn about poor black kids because they're making money on the back end by locking your black kids up. So the argument that they use, oh, these schools are failing, we need to do something about inner city schools, that's a damn lie. That was a lie then, and it's a lie now. The underlying motive was the fact that they took over that school board because it had finally elected, black people in this city had finally elected a majority black school board. That's the bottom line. And those are the things that we need to deal with. Okay? Those are the things that we need to deal with. So now, from what I understand, and this was before I moved back to the city, they had promised that this school was for black kids. The majority of Southwest Little Rock is black. And we heard a very eloquent argument from a teacher in the LRSD on the previous show, The Power of Justice, about the lack of black role models in this city. So the new head football coach for Southwest High School is a white guy. Here's a funny thing about it. I'll bet he doesn't even live in Little Rock. Originally, they say he was from Saline County. I bet he doesn't even live in Little Rock. Saline County is, those of you who live outside the city and don't know Saline County is where white people ran to get away from black folks. Did y'all hear what I just said? Saline County is considered the white flight county in central Arkansas. He lives in Bauxite. Is that Pulaski County, Russ? So this particular coach, it's more to just than what I'm talking about. Because I'm thinking like this. If I want someone to lead my child, my impressionable young man, I want that person to be above reproach. Oh, by the way, he lives in Bauxite, which is Saline County. Okay? He lives in Saline. Oh, wait a minute. He want to coach in Little Rock, but he lives in Saline County. Is he moving to Little Rock? I doubt it. But this particular coach had a unique past that should bring all parents pause for concern. I didn't know this until I saw this information last night. I saw where this man was hired. This man being Daryl Patton. As far as a head football coach is concerned, he was the 7A state champion at Fayetteville. Won, 2, 3 state championships? He's been hired as the head coach of Southwest High School. Now you're probably saying, well, Dave, that's no big deal. What's up with that? Well, from the news that I got, that he was allowed to resign from Fayetteville because of some improprieties. Now, let me ask you a question. Because when I tell you what these are, tell me how many black coaches would be rehired as head football coach if those improprieties existed with him. But prior to that, I decided that I wanted to find out, because it had never dawned on me, because see, my favorite high school coach in Little Rock, in Arkansas proper, is Coach Kent Laster. And Coach Kent Laster is the head football coach of Little Rock Central. Okay? And I got to see up close and personal how Coach Laster embraced the history of Central and understands what Central means to this city today. Coach Laster is a friend of mine. Obviously, we broadcasted the Little Rock Central football games this year. So I got to know Coach Laster well. I was impressed with him. Prior to getting to know him was when those 9 stripes on the Tiger logo, the new logo, that represents the Little Rock 9. When he did that, this was before I even got to know him. That told me that this man understood history. That told me that this man was a different breed of coach. And he proved that on the field this year, and he's certainly proven it off the field, just from what I know of him. Good guy. As a matter of fact, this is the guy that if I had a young person playing football in Little Rock, Coach Kent Laster is the person that I'd want my son playing for. I'm not just saying that because we broadcast their games. Let me tell you a little secret about me. I know a lot of people who have businesses here in this city. I know a lot of people who have businesses that are shady. I haven't approached you to advertise on this show. I haven't approached you to advertise on this station. The reason being is because if I attach my name to it, then I want you to be above reproach. Don't get mad. That's just how I am. If I'm attaching my name to Kent Laster, the new head football, well, he's not new any longer, the head coach of going into his 3rd year at Little Rock Central, this young man that I've gotten to know over the last 2 years is a cool cat. He's a good man. He's a Christian man. Not that that matters to me, but he is the person that I would love my child to play under. Because he talks about winning is not as important as being a solid person. You do everything off the field right, the on the field is going to come. I watched him talk to these kids. I watched how these kids loved him, cared about him. That's the type of guy I want coaching my child. And it doesn't hurt that he's a black male too. Here's what I don't want coaching my child. I don't want a coach who's an alcoholic. I don't want a coach who's a drug addict or a drug dealer. And I certainly don't want a coach who has a history of sexual improprieties that was made public all across the state. That coach is Daryl Patton. Now, allegedly, Mr. Patton, along with one of his assistants, was caught participating on school property in a sexual act with another teacher. In other words, a threesome, allegedly. He was, instead of being fired, they allowed him to resign so he could keep his certificate. So now Daryl Patton is going to be the new head football coach for Little Rock Southwest High School. Do you want that guy coaching your child? I know, Russ, I just say allegedly on the show. By the way, Russ is saying it was on video. I'm going to tell you like this, y'all. I've gotten to the point where I don't doubt Russ's word. If he says it is, it is. But I'm going to use allegedly. But according to reports, Mr. Patton, along with another coach, was caught having a threesome with a teacher. Do you want this guy coaching your child? Is this the type of role model that you want for your child? And I can hear some parents right now saying, I don't care about all that. Can he coach? If that's where your mindset is, then I feel sorry for your children. Apparently, photos were used in the divorce of one of the threesomes. So, by the way, you might say, well, Patton, he was just sowing his oats. Well, Daryl Patton, that head coach I'm talking about, at the time he was married. What'd you say? Oh, people cheat on their wives all the time. Is that your attitude? See, that's a Trump supporter attitude right there. Now, after the fact, yeah, he's still employed. Now, after the fact is this. Now, this has no bearing one way or the other on him cheating, but apparently his wife committed suicide 6 months later. Man, you want this guy coaching your team, your child? You want this guy coaching your impressionable young black male? If this particular high school, as they say, was for the minority population in Southwest, which is predominantly black or brown, why would you hire a white football coach? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I never had a black head football coach in the entire years that I played sports. I'm trying to think, I didn't have, let's see, when I first started playing football for Southwest in the 6th grade, I had Coach Chase, who was black, but he wasn't the head coach. Coach Grant was the head coach. In Dunbar, I didn't have a black coach at all. At Central, the secondary coach Coach Boone was the head basketball coach, but he was the secondary coach. So, and then in college, we had no black coaches at all. I don't have a problem playing under white coaches if they're treating me fair. And fortunately, I guess, during that time, we didn't have all our business put all over social media. But I guarantee you, had my mother known that one of my coaches was having threesomes in a classroom at the school, I guarantee you I would not have been playing for Little Rock Central. I promise you that. So how can the city of Little Rock simply say that this is okay? You're exactly right. Dr. Quinn said because sports, particularly basketball and football, are the largest plantations in modern society. If you get an opportunity, Dr. Quinn, read the book, The $40 Million Slave by William Roten. Excellent, excellent book that encapsulates exactly what you're saying. The question is, does this matter to you all? Or is the only concern is whether or not they win? Win at all cost. Don't matter about your character. Let me ask you something. You know, one of the things that coaches always do is talk about young men and character. Because a lot of times, coaches are the parent that young man doesn't have at home. Sometimes the coach is the only parent. A lot of times, he's the father figure. I grew up without a father. My coaches were my father figures. Even though they were white, I looked up to Coach Boone, Coach Cox, Coach Isom, and certainly Coach Horton. I remember when I first came back, and I didn't realize, I went to a Little Rock Central game, and I asked a friend, where is Coach Horton? Where are the coaches? I didn't know that Coach Horton and Coach Boone goes to every home football game at Little Rock Central. And someone said, well, they sit over there by the exit. Just go up there, you'll see them. And I went up and I embraced Coach Boone and Coach Horton, and we sat down and talked for most of the game. This was when Coach Register was still coaching Central. And something came up, and I was telling Coach Horton. I told him, I thanked him. This was a white man. I said, Coach, I said, I want to thank you. Thank both of you. Because I grew up without a dad. And oftentimes, I would come to practice angry, mad. And you all had a unique way of pulling me back. You all were my father, my dad. And Coach Horton said something profound to me. And if you never got a chance to meet and get to know Coach Clyde Horton, I'm gonna tell you, you missed a jewel. Coach Horton said that night, about 4 years ago, he said, well, Dave, because one of the things I had talked to Coach Horton about in that conversation is we want to get a broadcast for Little Rock Central. And you know what Coach Horton said, Dave? If anybody can do it, you can do it. And this year we got that broadcast. And as we did that broadcast, Coach Horton's voice echoed in my head. Dave, if anybody can get a broadcast going for Little Rock Central, you can do it. It took me 4 years. But that's how much I respected Coach Clyde Horton. That Coach Clyde Horton put the onus on me to say, hey, Dave, And I told him, I said, Coach, we want to get a broadcast. And I told him the story. Why don't we have a broadcast? Central is big enough. And we sat there that night and we talked and we talked and we talked. And before I left, he said, David, if anyone can get that broadcast going, you can do it. And I set out to do it. Because my mentor, the man that I respect, said I can do it. Are y'all following me here? It was Coach Horton that when I got injured in a football game, I never knew how good I was. I just went out there and played the game that I loved. And when I got injured in the Catholic game, and when they brought me to the sideline, it was Coach Horton who said, we got to get him back in there. He's a good one. He said he's a good one. That changed my whole perspective. I was team captain. Why am I telling you this? Because it was a coach who I looked up to, who I believed in, who I cried on his shoulder, who I talked to, who believed in me. And he didn't just believe in me, he believed in every one of those young men that was on that field. Any of us. Ask anybody who played under Coach Clyde Horton and Bernie Cox. And they weren't black, they were white. So to me, this is not a black and white issue. If you are a man of integrity, an athlete don't care about anything else, because we would run through a wall for Coach Horton. Because he was a man of integrity. That's the kind of coach I want my child playing for. That's the kind of coach that they should have chosen for Southwest High School. But they didn't. They chose a coach simply because he had won in Fayetteville. They certainly didn't choose him on his character or integrity. So it brings to question the motives of the officials in Little Rock. What you all are beginning to see, if you haven't already, is that you have officials from the top of the chain to the bottom of the chain lying to the Little Rock public. And the teacher that called the previous show, you could tell in her voice how hurt she was. She talked about how the majority of the kids that's going to be at Southwest High School are going to be black and brown kids, and how badly they need role models, and why are they hiring white coaches. So I decided to do some enterprising research. I reached out to a couple of friends of mine and asked the question, how many black head football coaches are there in the state of Arkansas? Not many. There are hundreds of schools here. I think the number someone finally settled on was 17. That seems like a lot. You know why? Because I know Arkansas. And then I decided, because the new high school, Southwest High School, is going to be playing in the 7A Central. That is the same conference as Little Rock Central. So there'll be a competitor. I decided, well, wait a minute. That's the biggest conference in the state. How many black head football coaches are in the 7A conference? Because, they have Central, North, and West, I believe. They have 4 different ones. And there's only one initially. And that's Coach Kent Laster. The head coach that was at McClellan, who was making chicken soup out of chicken poop, literally, on a team that had poor equipment, that couldn't even play on his own home field. He's been hired at Jacksonville. He went to Jacksonville. He didn't even have, apparently, he went ahead and took the job at Jacksonville because apparently he wasn't going to even be considered for this new high school. By the way, he was black. I asked the question earlier, had that been a black head coach who was caught in a tryst on school property, sexual misconduct to say the least, would that guy have, I don't care if he won 10 state titles, would that guy have an opportunity to coach, head coach again in Arkansas? You know the answer as well as I do, and it's a hell no. So here's a guy who certainly had many improprieties in his past. The only reason he was hired probably is because he won in Fayetteville. I wonder how many black people are going to be on his staff. Because when you look across the 7A conference as a whole, there are only now 2 black coaches. They just hired a black coach, from what I understand, in Rogers. And I held that straight from a horse's mouth, that I won't reveal my sources to you. But I know that to be fact. There are only 6. Well, let me take the back. There are no black offensive and defensive coordinators. And I think there are 6 in 6A. So the reason I'm throwing these numbers at you, because those of you out there who are upset that they hired a white coach to mentor a minority school, you ought to be raising hell all across this state. And I think Russ makes a good point. The state-run school system is run by Northwest Arkansas. That being Asa Hutchinson and his cronies that he's put in power. Mike Poore, Johnny Key, all of those ones that are on the state education board. But there aren't many black coaches. And here's what one of my sources said, because I reached out to 2 sources. He made an interesting point, which is a valid point. He said, see, part of the problem is that most guys or black males, when they go to school and get their degrees, they don't teach. They can't get a teaching certificate. So one of the requirements, from what I understand in the Little Rock School District, is that if you're going to coach, then you have to teach a class. Coach Lasker would tell me all the time how much of a difficulty it is, and part of the reason that Arkansas football is behind is because in Texas, the head football coach don't teach classes. If anything, they'll teach gym. That's how it used to be when we were growing up. You always knew you were going to you had gym, and it was going to be taught by a coach. But now from what I understand here in Little Rock, is that they require that coach teach a class. So what my source told me was that a lot of these young black males, when they go off to college, they're not going off to college to get teaching degrees. And thus, you're not getting black head coaches, or you're not getting black coaches, period. That's a valid argument. And as I informed him, he first said, well, they're not graduating. Well, I said, it may not be that they're not graduating. They're simply choosing a profession other than teaching. And he said, yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it from that perspective. Because a lot of these young men are they're getting their degrees. They're just not teaching degrees. And what I would advise people, young black males as a whole, is that, hey, if you go to school and get a teaching certificate, a degree. Let's say, for instance, you go to school for criminal justice. You can still go get a teaching certificate. All you got to do is pass the teacher's exam. In other words, you don't have to teach in the field that you went to college for. Some do, some don't. But that's part of the problem why you don't have a lot of black head football coaches or coaches, period, in the state of Arkansas. And you know racism has something to do with it as well. Just like it does in college. Just like it does in the NFL. For whatever reasons, white people believe that football is the holy grail. And the only person that can coach football is a white male. I don't care how long you played. I don't care how good you were when you played. But the only guy that can coach football in this country is a white male. You know, I talk about this a little bit. You know, I tell people all the time that part of the reason that football is the way it is because of the coaches. The majority of the coaches are white. I would say 90%. If you went across the country, I'd say 90% of high school coaches are white. I would say that 90% of college coaches are white. And we know 95% of NFL coaches are white. But let's go back to high school coaches. Someone brought up the question, because I'm a big McCaffrey fan who plays for the Carolina Panthers. I'm a big fan. Was a fan when he was in Stanford. And the same old mantra, he'll never make the pros. He's a white boy. They're going to move him to another position. Wait a minute. Why? He was an excellent running back at Stanford. Excellent. Why is it that you don't see a lot of white running backs? That's because the head coaches think that black kids are the only one that can run running back. The majority of them. So same as you don't see a lot of black quarterbacks. And certainly when I was coming up, is because that superstar quarterback, black quarterback, he's going to be moved to wide receiver or tailback or safety. Our best record at Southern Arkansas University was with a guy by the name of Gary Shepard. Gary Shepard was 5'11". He weighed about 190 pounds. Well, he didn't weigh that much. He weighed 180 pounds. He was from Shreveport, Louisiana. And he was an excellent athlete. Apparently played quarterback in high school and also threw the javelin. He was black. They recruited him as a wide receiver. It wasn't until we were playing a pickup football game in summer school and Gary was quarterbacking that coach came out and looked at him and said, whoa, we need to put him at quarterback. And that next season, which was my last, we were 7-4. Coaches calls the racial divisions that we see throughout sports. It used to be that only white kids could do point guard, but now that's been debunked. I say all this to say that Daryl Patton might be a damn good football coach. Apparently he is, based on his history. But he's a sorry human being. And you know what? I think I'd rather have a damn good human being to mentor my child than someone like Daryl Patton. And to the Little Rock folks that are upset, this is what happens when you don't vote. Remember that song I played? In fact, that's going to be my quote when I leave today, is I'm going to play that song again. This is what happens when you don't vote. When you sit around and let other people decide for you who you are. Don't get mad at me. Get mad at yourself. We are the problem. We really are. And until we get up off our duffs and decide that we've had enough, we can't sit in our beauty shops and talk to the the hairstylists or the barber and say how much we upset. We can't do that anymore. Okay? We can't sit around at home playing spades with one another or dirty hearts with one another and complain to one another without getting to the polls. We can't do that anymore. We've got to take this country back. You heard me talk about yesterday that the majority of the politicians that support Donald Trump, they support Donald Trump because at least 10 of them benefited directly from the tax cut. To hell with their constituents. To hell with, and they walk around today talking about how the tax cut has benefited middle class and poor people. And we know statistically the tax cut did nothing for middle class, low middle class, and poor people. Nothing. We have to take this country back. It begins with the ballot. It's not a panacea. It's not the be-all to end-all, but this is the rhetorical shot that should be fired across the bow of anyone who does not believe in democracy, who does not believe for the people, by the people. And it's clear many of the politicians in Washington and in your state houses have decided that they're more concerned about lobbyists and how many people can donate to their campaigns so they can put money in their pockets as opposed to whether or not a child can eat lunch at school. We have to take this country back. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to get the Daryl Pattons of the world. Because you know what? The white politicians who are in the know, the fix was in. They were never going to hire a black person for that school. They were not, look, they brought you in as a token. They Rooney ruled you. Let's check the box. Let's bring a black man in and make it look like we looking at all the candidates. But we know, I mean, you tell me, what black man that can be a head coach has not been fired for having sex with co-workers at school? You mean to tell me that there was no black man that had a much better character than this Yahoo that they hired? Are you telling me that? Of all the black men that applied for that job, are you telling me that this man who was removed from his position because of sexual misconduct, his resume, his background stood head and shoulders above a black candidate? Come on, man. This is an old okie doke here. We ought to be sick of this. But our black leaders in this city will not do a damn thing. Where are you? Don't matter to y'all, do it. Long as you're getting your tithes and offering. That's the problem. That's what's going on in this city. The reason this city is not prospering is because of us and the people that we elect. Let me get out of here. I got upset talking about this. Wow. And we got a school system that's ran by people that live in Northwest Arkansas. We got a city board that won't even demand that the people that make money off of this city live in this city. How the hell are you going to hire a coach that lives in Saline County to coach a school in Pulaski County? Come on, man. Y'all ought to be tired of this. You all ought to make a run on the polls. If you don't get to the polls and vote, it is your fault. You get what you deserve. I got to get out of here. Here's my quote for the day. I hope you all enjoy this. I certainly did. Here we go.
Get down, cause if I don't, you'll probably never know. First thing first, you know back in middle school when they taught us, it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor, or the governor, and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws, they just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislative branch. Yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't ever even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 08, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court calls. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't want to tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the 3rd branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon, they had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in, cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep the law, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
You've been listening to Black Focus, where we discuss our issues with our solutions and our voices. Join us every weekday afternoon at 1 p.m. on joinetradio.com.